Okay, welcome back from lunch, everybody. We are starting an interesting afternoon. We have a sandwich afternoon for the next 2 hours, a panel discussion for about 45 minutes, followed by 3 short, sharp presentations about initiatives you might not be familiar with, and then a second panel of 45 minutes. I won't tell you about the second panel yet, because you'll forget, so I'll tell you now about the first panel. The first panel is all about the benefits. If IDMP gets out on the streets and really embeds itself into healthcare and clinical research, what will it bring? What are the benefits it will bring? And I'm delighted to have panel members who I will just briefly introduce, and they will introduce themselves for a little bit longer each. And then they will each tell us in their first answer to the first question they know already is for your stakeholder group, for the activities in which you're involved, what do you see being the real benefits IDMP can bring? So this is very much about getting in the real world. And so I'm just going to go in this order, but it's a little bit random. So I have Alexandra, who is here from the European Medicines Agency, but wearing a very special hat of something called Darwin EU. So she's really into gaining insights from real-world data. Lisbeth is a pediatrician from the Netherlands, but also works really closely with the rare disease community and rare disease patients, and so she will bring that double perspective of clinician and rare diseases. Benjamin is a GP, who also is very passionate about evidence-based medicine and the development of guidelines, and will bring that double perspective in. Olivia is a pharmacist working in the hospital sector, I think, and you will tell us all about the medicine's perspective from the point of view of near to the patient, near to the clinician, right in the heart of your specialty. And Bart is a colleague I've worked with for many years at Johnson & Johnson, who is really, I don't know whether you're wearing 2 hats or 1 hat. One hat, of course, is the general industry hat, but you have been a founding father of how real-world data can be harnessed at a European scale for insight generation. And again, maybe you'll wear both hats a bit. So with that spectrum of perspectives, I'm going to just now go around the audience, sorry, not the audience, the panel, and ask them to introduce themselves a bit more, and at the same time to tell us why their center of gravity is excited. The word excited has to be somewhere in the spirit of your answer. Why are you excited about the opportunity of IDMP? Can I start with you?
Yes, thank you very much, Deepak. So I'm Alexandra Pocurariu, and I work as a pharmacoepidemiologist at TMA, part of the Darwin EU project. And I also have a background in pharmacovigilance, and I'm a pharmacist by training. I'm excited to be here because as a pharmacoepidemiologist, we like data, we like healthcare data, and we like good quality data, and more is more. So we want more standardization so we can use the data to transfer, to help the regulators make decisions and to help the public health.
I'm Lisbeth Sidiers from the Netherlands. First of all, I want to congratulate the UNICOM project with the results. We, as pediatricians, as well as patient representative, we are very glad with this result. It gives much more information about medicines we are taking and for what reason. 10 years ago, we started a rare disease group within the European Academy of Pediatrics. From that work, we understood more and more that it is very important to have interoperable data on rare diseases, cross-bordering. So then we did a lot of work. I went to many countries and saw the differences in health systems. But the patients with rare diseases have the same needs, medicine and social care. So that is what we now are working on from the patient perspective in a small foundation.
So I'm Benjamin Fouquer, I'm a GP. And I'm very interested I work as a GP here in Brussels with many patients, many nationalities, so I'm very interested the core of my work is to transmit information to patients. And I'll also work as a researcher with terminologies, and especially with SNOMED. And for me, the main outcome of that kind of research you are speaking here about is to transmit and to counsel the good information to the patient in his own language, or in the good way he can understand it and take his medication in the good way.
Hello, my name is Olivia Daller. I'm a hospital and clinical pharmacist in the University Hospital here in Brussels, so I didn't come from far this morning, it was easy for me. And I'm also working as a professor at Université Catholique de Louvain in the research team in clinical pharmacy and pharmacoepidemiology. But today I will mostly talk with my role as a hospital pharmacist, because there are already many use cases and many things to say just about that part, even if I see many opportunities with IDMP in research and other aspects. Just as a hospital pharmacist, I already have many use cases and ideas.
Thank you very much. My name is Bart van Nieuwenhuizen, and thank you for the introduction and the invitation, Deepak, and also for profiling me the way that I look really old. Founding father sounds very old, but it's true. I mean, over the last 15 years or so, we have been working mainly in the context of European projects, starting with EHR4CR, but then also into EMIF, EDEN, and others, mainly on the reuse of data, so secondary use of data, and that's actually going to be the primary hat that I will be wearing. Of course, there are multiple other aspects around unique product identification that are of relevance within research, even internal to any given life sciences company, not to talk about production and supply chain, but my main focus, if you allow me, would be in reuse of data.
Maybe a question I didn't put in the email to you, but it just occurs to me might be quite a nice thing to think about, is about the patient. Even if you, in your day job, don't think about patients a lot, some of you do all day, some of you less. All of you have, grandmothers, mothers, fathers, parents, kids. If they ask you, what's the benefit to patients of this IDMP, if it really goes out, as I say, on the streets and it's everywhere, pick one example that you would give to say, why is this really worth getting right? Why is this going to deliver some benefits? Pick any random thing in your head, starting with you, Bart, and let's travel this way.
Well, clearly it would be a unique, unequivocal identification of a drug. So what are you taking? And having that as a unique identifier wherever you go. I think that would be the benefit.
And you mean wherever you go in the world?
As a patient in the world, yeah.
I'm really glad that you asked this question, because actually to me, the whole point of this is really the patient. And all of us, as you said, are patient, or we have our family. And having this patient at the hospital daily, this is really why we are doing this. As a clinical pharmacist, I meet a lot of patients. And we have patients, the weather in Belgium is terrible. So a lot of retired people, they like to spend a couple of months in Spain, for example. So they have their Belgian medication, they have their Spanish medication, and they come to the hospital. And the first thing I do as a clinical pharmacist is doing medication reconciliation. So that's the step where we ask, what were you taking? What do we have on the hospital formulary? And how can we match and substitute from your home medication to our hospital medication? And it looks a very easy process, but it's not at all, especially when people come from different countries. It's a very international city here, where we have people using medication from other countries, but not only foreign drugs. It's important to have a standardized language for the medication from the ambulatory setting to the hospital setting. And when we ask the patient, what are you taking as a drug? They say, oh, you know, it's all on the computer. Because there is this illusion that now we are living in a digitalized world and everything is in the computer. So they are wondering why I'm asking this. People don't even imagine that we don't have that information standardized. So I think it will be very useful to have this information across all the systems, not only internationally, but also nationally, etc.
I will follow this example. So I can speak about reconciliation between hospital and ambulatory care. So many patients are discharged from the hospital with the medication, and many of the medication of the hospital are different from the pharmacist because the medication in the pharmacy in the hospital of some medication, but it's not generally it's not the same boxes, the same trademark as in ambulatory care. So I hope that I could do that job easily, like you, between hospital and ambulatory care. So.
For me, in my practice, but also for patient organization, it will be a great help that there is a standard information in written language, so from industry, from where it's produced, from the factory, until home. So if you have a little box and you cannot exactly read what is on there, you can go to a website and see exactly from industry to home what is about this medicine. And not only in written language, but also in digital language. So that this standard can be exchanged from computer to computer. And then it can be part of what is now developing the European health data space as an integral part of your whole personal health record. That is a big value.
Thank you very much. So for regulators, they make decisions based on science and on evidence, and increasingly that evidence is based on real-world data, in addition to the very valuable clinical trials. But there are some parts where clinical trials can't help. For example, long-term marketing surveillance. So we need this real-world data. It is messy. It's a lot of heterogeneity, especially in terms of drugs. And I can tell you that we work a lot, and my team, it's always a big struggle to standardize the drugs. So if you do, someone else is doing the work for us, and especially if it's done at the source, that will solve a lot of problems, that will help with missing data, that would help with misclassification, will reduce errors in the study, and it will increase the speed of the study, because we can do it faster, then the decisions are made faster, and then it benefits public health. I mean, if a drug has to be withdrawn and will be ultimately withdrawn, it's better, I choose a very sad example, but it's better to do it faster than later. So, thank you.
Well, let me build on that with a question back. There were some interesting topics that came up in a panel before the coffee break this morning, and linking in with that is about the data. So yeah, we have spoken about the patients, and I'll come back to patients in a moment. But presumably in all of these electronic health records, there will be better specified medicines in each patient's record. What does that offer you from insight generation perspective? I mean, Darwin is about generating insights from data. We're going to hear about Darwin a bit later. But do you see this accurate identification of medicines making a difference to the inference capabilities that you will have in the future? And tell us about that.
Yes, absolutely. So someone mentioned in the morning that we have more and more complicated products like IDMP, gene therapies. For those, it's crucial to know the exact product, not generic like the ATC class. That's almost nothing. For a very specific product, you know to know precisely. Even the batch number for vaccine, the batch number is very important, and so on and so forth. So very precise identification, which is a luxury now. So basically, if regulators come to us, or someone comes with a very specific question, like they want to know this CAR T-cell therapy, but they need the batch number, we say, no, we are sorry, we don't have the data. Because in most of the cases, because the data is not coded, very specific at source, so the details are lost in translation, and when it reaches the researcher, you look and you just have the ATC code. I'm sorry, that's not enough. For some studies, that's not enough. Secondly, there are errors, because of imprecision source, there are errors that are propagated, and then you end up with some errors in the study. So it will increase the data quality, and it will increase the result quality, ultimately. And the third one I mentioned before is the speed. So it's a lot of work happening, the phenotyping, what we call phenotyping, to manage to identify the condition. It's harder, but also the drugs. If that's much faster, the study speed increases exponentially. So then you can do it faster.
Thank you. That was very clear, very compelling. Lisbeth, for research in pediatrics or rare disease, do you see an advantage with IDMP?
I think when IDMP is implemented in real life medicine, then you get natural history from all the data you gather from patients, whether they can walk, what lab results they have, all the data together. And then if new medicine come in, you have already natural history of these patients, and you see the differences in these data changes. So the primary use will help secondary use, but primary use and definition of the data first.
Thank you. That's very nice that you've brought those two together, primary and secondary, because that is very important too.
Also for research.
The evidence that you use when you develop guidelines in the future and so on, do you see IDMP helping?
For developing guidelines, I think it's very important to apply the guidelines in the good way and rapidly, quickly for the GPs and the patient understand it also. So we need some good data to transmit all the information directly between the EHR and the guideline, and to connect the databases. And this is very important, I think, to identify good the medication, and in the good way to connect with all the recommendation you have to follow as a practitioner.
Thank you. Can I ask you a follow-up question? I know from my dear colleague Bob, who is in the audience somewhere, that there is increasing interest, certainly within Europe, of sharing guidelines between countries. Would IDMP make it more easy to apply a guideline that includes treatment recommendations in another country? Would it make a difference?
Yes, it could be. Indeed, the redaction of guideline is more and more a shared work in Europe between working groups because it's a hard work, it's a long work, so it's not feasible in every country. Every country can't develop its own guidelines. So in Belgium, for example, we take many times guidelines from England, from France, from Dutch guidelines, for example. And if to translate the medication between guidelines, it could be very useful. Yes, of course.
Thank you. Olivia.
The benefit I would see in the hospital, right? So maybe I will bring again a hot topic. It's the shortage thing. We discussed this already a lot this morning. So I will just go from the place where thanks to IDMP, we found an alternative on another market. That's nice. But actually, that's not where it ends. There are many steps after that at the hospital to have that drug actually to the patient. So when we find an alternative, We have to manage all the stocks, and we might have automated stocks, and we have to communicate to the nurses saying that this is equivalent to that. And if we had some kind of standardization, it could help and also teach all the users in which characteristics are similar. And there is also a lot of work regarding the e-prescription, because we need the physician to be able, on a very transparent way, to prescribe exactly the right drug, the one that we have on stock, the one that is equivalent to the one we used to have, etc. And this does not work by magic. Currently, all this is manual parameterization, so we spend a lot of energy, a lot of time trying to have things working nicely, smoothly across the prescription, the dispensing, the administration of drugs. And if we had something standardized, it would help and prevent all the work from scratch when we have a new drug entering the hospital. And it would help managing the stocks, it would help for the prescription, it will help for the nurses. Because all this work, we have to do it now. So we are not talking about nice to have. We are talking about things that need to be done. I hope you're not going to the hospital tonight, but if something happens, you will require some drugs and you will need that drug today. So we are not talking about something in the future. It's not science fiction. We need a workflow for the medication, and we talked this morning about closed loops, etc. We need this now. And currently we are spending a lot of energy to have things working, but it's a waste of time, a waste of energy, and we wish we could spend our time doing more clinical activities. And I really see in that kind of a tool, I call it a tool, a way of having things easier.
Yeah, when you look at this from a life sciences research company, a pharmaceutical company if you like, in general, reuse of data, so when you talk about real-world data, real-world evidence, there are, as a foundational layer of data, a number of data types that you always want to have whichever research you do. And that's obviously the demographics of a patient, the diagnoses, the procedures that have been applied, interventions or diagnostics, the lab information, and of course, the medication. And when we reuse data, so retrospective non-interventional research based on these types of data, we typically want to work in a federated network, so whereby the data stays within each of the institutions of the data holders, mostly hospitals. And then we want to map those data sets to a common data model. And many of you may have heard of OMOP as a common data model, which is providing both the syntactic and semantic harmonized approach to data sets. And once you have that, then you can actually identify cohorts of patients, as Alexandra already pointed out. So really do the phenotyping, and the phenotyping is typically involving these 5 foundational data types. What we experience is that we have a lot of challenges with harmonization of drugs across countries, because each country now has its own thesaurus of medication with commercial and generic names, and where it very often goes wrong is typically in combination drugs, where you have 2 active ingredients, and then in lists like RX norm, they are listed twice, or you have to, it's very difficult, complicated to work with these types of combination drugs. So actually, in preparation to this meeting, I asked a few guys who are very hands-on in the OMOP environment and in the Odyssey community, whether there is any work happening to map the IDMP codes to the OMOP concepts. and it's very silent. So I think that's clearly an area where work still needs to start or needs to happen. Rob is going to add to that. So I'm hoping you're going to correct me, Rob. But so I think that one of the success factors of the IDMP standard would be that there is indeed a common ETL, a translation from the IDMP standards to the OMOP concepts, because that would really enable research at the European and at a global level.
Bart, thank you. In fact, did anybody want to?
Rob was raising his hand.
When we're talking big data and what the role of IDMP could be, for currently the big data have the common data model and it's based on OMOP. I think IDMP could bring another level of precision here, because OMOP solves the problems of this diversity and heterogeneity by asking to, in an ETL process, to come to something that is still at a very high aggregated level. The substance, for instance, doesn't need to be specified. The dose form is the Eric's norm dose form terminology, which is inferior to the ADQM terminology. So I think it will still take some time, because IDMP is not implemented across the whole therapeutic arsenal in very few countries. But once it is there, I think, and it is used in primary care, then in the secondary data, it will bring another level of precision to the common data models of big data.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. And that's exactly what we need. Huh? I mean, we because we're now kind of struggling a little bit with RX norm and ATC and creating hybrid classifications, and we're always lacking some type of granularity. So definitely, if there is a unique way of identifying compounds and substances, and then my call would be to really set up maybe a joint working group between this group and the Odyssey community to look at how are we going to start to translate the IDMP standards into the OMOP concepts.
That sounds like a great call to action. We should think about whether we want to edit the white paper. That sounds like a good one to add. Can I ask if the audience is burning with an exciting question? I'd love to give you a chance to come in. I know you've been falling asleep after lunch, but this has been a rather exciting panel. I think that if I had to think about sales and marketing for IDMP, this lovely, very diverse panel has given us riches of reasons why everybody should be excited.
You should have been a salesperson, Deepak.
I should have been. No, you're the salespeople.
Karl Strothmann again. I would like to open the perspective a little bit beyond Europe. Open it a little bit beyond Europe, because in many other countries, I mean, they don't even have the, let's say, infrastructure we have available here in Europe or in North America. And are there any concerns or considerations also by IDMP how to help countries which are not so advanced? Or would it be possible to have I don't know, 2 levels of complexity or whatever? I have no idea. I was just curious, are there any considerations, or do we just do it at our level and disregard the rest of the world?
It's a great question. Let's see what our panel make of it, because they're a smart bunch. So what you're being asked really is, I asked you early on, what you see as the benefits, and you were thinking perhaps about your own geographical ecosystem. If you now think planet, what could we in Europe, assuming that in Europe we think we have some advantages, Karl has hinted that we have some, do you think there are things that we could utilize in our own capabilities that we could help to globalize? And I mean, I don't have to be strict on the order. 2 of you have a microphone. 1 of you could fight to go first.
Well, I now speak as a pediatrician. I now speak as a pediatrician. So we as pediatricians are united in Netherlands, in Europe and globally. So WHO provided us a booklet from primary care pediatrics. So it's out of hospitals, which is more difficult than inside hospitals. So we are ready at this moment to make FHIR profiles, including the IDMP, translating this written booklet in FHIR profiles. And the booklet is very popular, even in Cameroon and whatever. So we are ready for that. So,
okay, so
we don't want to waste, because at this moment, the fragmentation, the difference between countries, lower, middle, and high economy, and I, as coming from Netherlands, high economy country, I sort of feel obliged to contribute also to the middle economy countries to the children living there.
Great, that's a lovely spirit. Does anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think that implementing a standard like IDMP or anything else assumes a digital version of healthcare being available. But having said that, and thinking again about the Odyssey open science community, Odyssey is a global collaboration of both public and private researchers to look at how can we advance reuse of data. While Odyssey started in the US, coordinated in Columbia University, what we now see is a growing number of regional chapters. So there is a European chapter, there is an Asian chapter, but there is also an African chapter. So, and the African chapter is actually very active, and it's now active in about 10 countries across Africa. So, and I think that they actually, in a number of cases, are leapfrogging where we were. So if IDMP is indeed an implementable and practical standard, I think that countries in Africa could also start to adopt that fairly fast, in fact.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to add to that, but Bart said it already. So yeah, we work with OMOP, who is not bound to Europe, and RX norm is also originated in US. I think what we have in Europe is heterogeneity, and not all of it is bad. A lot of it is beautiful, and it's clinical heterogeneity. Of course, different doctors treat patients differently, and the overall survival of different diseases is different. But dealing with it is quite hard. But I think we are very trained. So Europe is like a sandbox, and if we manage to make it work here, it would be easier to go globally. Or maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think we have a lot of training ground.
Yeah, optimism's good. Have any of the other regulators around the world looked at what you're doing with Darwin and said, hey,
yes.
I know we haven't had your presentation yet. So if you don't know what Darwin is, just have to hold on, you'll hear soon. But does anybody else?
I like the anticipation. Yes, we are all a big team, and we are collaborating especially with FDA, but with many others, but not a lot, I would say. But yeah, in terms of ideas and inspiration, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you want to come in on this? Globalization, it's entirely optional.
We mentioned it before, but of course, on a pharmacovigilance point of view, this is also a global thing. And again, maybe closer to my practice, we are always searching for databases for decision support. We mentioned this morning drug-drug interaction, but there are so many more aspects related to decision support. It's for the prescription of the physician, it's for the verification of the pharmacist, it's at the level of the nurse also. And so far, we can find different sources using different aspects of the medication to attach the rule to. And if we could work globally on having sets of rules that could be used everywhere, I think that IDMP could also help to do that.
Yes, please. So I think, yes, it's very important the information could be accessible to other database, to the interoperability between database. So, for example, if the IDMP connects correctly with the substance set value, the dose set value, the form set value, and it could be translated information to access to other database, like you said, the decision support, the picture database with pictures of medications, very important for patients, and so on. The most important in interoperability is to have some connection between databases, and we lack of that, and because databases are developed sometimes in one country, sometimes in another one, it's important to have this interoperability.
Thank you, that's great. I'm going to allow one more audience question, and then we're going to wrap up the panel. Okay.
How do you see the role of Medicaid, of rare disease, for instance, registries in the whole scaling up? Because rare diseases, as they are by definition rare, you have a couple of patients in every country. And I've been actually involved in one of the projects involving registries, and we came to the conclusion, well, we don't have any standardized data of the medication that the patients are receiving. Would that be a way, because the European Union is supporting the registries very much, would that be a way of somehow motivating the countries, the local countries, to implement the standard, the sooner the better, of course? Thanks.
Well, that's a really fascinating one. I think, Lisbeth, we have to come to you first with that one.
Yeah, rare diseases are two small groups in each country. That's why we thought interoperability of data is necessary. So for interoperability, you need codings. What is also a problem, orphan drugs are expensive because the development, it's very difficult to develop from a genetic abnormality into a drug, which works in your body. What is helping if we would have more natural history? So if we would have more primary use data. And that is at the moment already a big problem. There's no state with the common set of data. So the one is implementing the ICF, the other is implementing the ITC. Everyone is using the ICD because usually of administrative reasons. But the combination of these codings and what is happening with the patient generates data, continuously generates data. If you have a new drug, you can see what is happening with the data from the group of patients. And that is why FHIR profiles are very handy, because then you can assign all the data to one rare disease and see if you have thalassemia, your hemoglobin has to be followed, and your length has to be followed, and your abilities have to be followed. Other thing is, how do you get the data from rare diseases if you are doing studies? You need the patients. So patients are contributing at the moment to research, small groups of patients. Then the medicine comes on the market. And then what is the problem? Not everyone gets, every country is reimbursing. For example, I follow a child in the village Almere where I live, where I practice, with achondroplasia, dwarfism. There is a new drug, and it's EMA valuable. Now, it's not reimbursed in the Netherlands, but in Germany. So this family is actually thinking of moving to Germany, where this medicine is reimbursed. In the Netherlands, it can take years. And even in Turkey, it's reimbursed. So I think there should also be some kind of public understanding. And why is it reimbursed in the Netherlands and not in? And why is every country doing the same thing all over again, giving their own qualification? If it's once okay with EMA, it should be evaluated. So that is a problem with rare diseases. And these groups are so small. The parents have to take all the work. They have to quit working because they have a disabled child. So that's also why I'm sitting here speaking for them, because they lose jobs. They lose field and communities. So in special case in rare diseases, it's much more difficult to stand up and speak for them, and that's what we all have to care for these children.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this topic? You don't have to.
I just want to indeed stress the importance of having big volumes of data. of a high enough level of quality over a long period of time. And I think that otherwise we will never be able to do the research that we need. And rare disease is a very specific case, because by essence it is already about a small group of patients. But any other research, we're really also doing a lot of stratifications, patient stratifications, and subgroups of patients. Just think about personalized medicine, where one of the first stratifications is on genetic mutations. And before you know it, you may start with maybe 10,000 patients, but you end up with just a few hundred patients, which might not be enough to have the power you require for your analysis. So I think we need to do everything we can, not only for rare diseases, but also for all of the other types of research, to increase the volume of available data for research, which is of a good enough quality.
Thank you. I mean, it feels to me that you have collectively created a real feeling for why this needs to accelerate. So I'm going to ask you to make a closing remark each to answer one question that I think I may have given you in the email, I can't remember, which is an accelerator. If you had to pick an accelerator, something that will speed up the process of turning a set of, published standards into everyday reality, permeating all the systems you've mentioned, can you each pick one accelerator, something that is going to help get good things to patients more quickly? Each of you can think of an accelerator, and randomly, when you're ready, grab the microphone.
I'm going to start at the end and repeat what I said. Map IDMP to the OMOP concepts.
Okay.
That's going to boost research at least. But of course, that's not the starting point.
No, okay.
And I think my neighbor here will say something more about where to start.
No pressure, Olivia.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I think that, of course, what would really help is that we have that information from the source. And to me, the source would be when we have that drug coming to the market. It needs to, it's just my perspective, it needs to come from the industry that commercializes that drug. They should provide that information. And to have them doing that, we need the authorities to ask them to do it. And we need it not only for the drug brands, but also for everything like the softwares we use for the electronic health records. They also need to be able to understand that kind of information and process it. But it needs to come from above, because otherwise nothing will be done.
That's great. Thank you very much. Benjamin.
Oh, yes. So I essentially the same message like you. It's important to connect to other databases, to Substance, to OMOP for research, but also other databases to spread the information, to be useful for other outcomes like patient information and so on.
I would like that public authorities enforce IDMP to be integrated in every health system, in personal health records, in Europe and, where it's possible, beyond. If it happens in Europe with all the different health systems, it can easily be transformed globally. So we can get the example. We can collaborate with India, which is already far advanced in the same route. And I think also authorities should enforce IT companies, vendors, to integrate all these standards in their systems and not asking every time new money, just one system, one standard for all, including lovely. HL7 and all the terminologies.
Okay, lovely. Oh no, okay, I think that we're all right. Can you mute that person who's accidentally left the microphone on? No, okay. It's okay. Anyway, they've stopped now. So
Yes, thank you. So I can tell you what to do, but I don't know how.
Okay, that's all right. That's
very
okay.
helpful.
We have clever people who will
yes,
do the how.
perfect. That's why I like it. I think we should start small because it can seem very daunting. It's an incredibly hard task, and you guys already put so much work into it, so you know better than me. It seems very hard. So I would suggest to start small, and then feedback the impact that it has. So if a researcher sees that, oh, my data quality improve a lot because what you guys did, just feedback back to the source, and then keep going.
Okay, I think feedback loops is a lovely closure remark on the panel, because I think that there is a real need to accelerate a momentum. But you know, one is often asking policymakers to make changes, funders to allocate funding, and they're nervous to do these weird things that might take years to deliver benefit. So target early wins, feedback on those wins to build a reinforcing cycle. I think that's a very nice closing message. We're now entering what I would call the middle part of the sandwich, the jam. So I want you to give thanks to 4 of my panel members who will leave the stage. The 5th one is going to give the first of the 3 short talks. So please, round of applause to my panel.